Well, good morning. Hopefully, we have that audio issue fixed. You can let me know if we do. Welcome to the Whole50 Bible study. So grateful that you are here with us this morning. And the great thing about it being live is you can let me know if there's an issue. And the bad thing about it being live is I just got to kind of fix it on the fly. So today we are in the book of Hebrews chapter 11. Tomorrow we'll be in Hebrews chapter 12. We've been in the Old Testament for a little bit, but now we're into the New. And our whole goal here is simply to identify a more holistic pathway to faith, to get a more rounded view in our faith. And we are now 39 days into the study. And on day 50, we're going to transition to a new Bible study. But I have a couple of things that I want to tell you about. First, if you're in northeastern Ohio or anywhere close, I would love to see you this Sunday, May 16th at 11 o'clock a.m. over at Willoughby at Daniels Park. I'm going to be there in person for our first in-person gathering in northeastern Ohio. I have no idea what to expect, but the one thing that you can expect is that it'll be a lot of fun. And the other thing you can expect with me is you never really know what'll happen. The other thing that I want to make sure that you know about is this study. Party On, starting on May 17th, so we're getting close. In fact, the boxes are going to be packed today with the free gift, with these Bible studies going out to you. Super excited to look at the food, the feasts, the festivals in the Bible. If you go to christtable.today and donate, I'm going to send this to you for free. If you're not able to donate, let me know, and I still will make sure that we get one of these out to you. But this is literally last call. They're being packed today, and they're going in the mail tomorrow so that they will get to you in time. So without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and jump into the Bible study for today. We are in Hebrews chapter 11, and this has been called traditionally the Hall of Fame or the Hall of Faith because it essentially lists a number of people who had faith in the Old Testament. We read about Abel, we read about Abraham and Sarah. We read about Isaac and Jacob. We read about Enoch in here. We read about Noah in here. And this is a high-powered group of people who had faith, and because of their faith, extraordinary, amazing things happen. Now, rather than read through that list of people, and you might even want to read through the entire first part of Hebrews 11, it's an easy read as extra credit for today. We're going to jump into the end in our Bible study to verse 32. Now, how much more do I need to say? The author says, after writing all of those things to us, it would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David, of Samuel, and of all of the prophets. So really, the writer says, I can't list out all of these people who should be listed here. And it's interesting to me that he lists Samson as a part of this list, because Samson, if the only thing you know about Samson are the Sunday school stories that you've heard, you don't know the real Samson. You should go back to the book of Judges at some point and read about Samson, because Samson was a mess. Samson was a travesty. He was a womanizer. He was just a really kind of bad guy. Did a lot of terrible things throughout his whole life, but he's listed here in this kind of Hall of Fame, in this Hall of Faith. Why is that? Well, it seems to be that you don't have to be perfect in order to have a tremendous amount of faith, and you don't have to be perfect in order to, in God's eyes, be able to be great. And so the fact even that Samson is listed here should give folks and you and I hope that no matter what we've done, no matter what is in our past, we can still be listed among the greats. But let's keep going. By faith, verse 33 says, these people overthrew kingdoms. They ruled with justice, and they received what God had promised to them. Look at this. Who wouldn't love, well, I don't know that I want to shut the mouth of a lion. I don't want to be that close to a lion that I have to shut the lion's mouth. But metaphorically, I think that I can say, and all of us would say, that we would love We would love to have the bravery and the courage to shut the mouth of lions. Maybe even the bravery and the courage to literally be able to walk up to lions in our life, literal or figurative, and take control of those situations, take control of those things, to quench the flames of fire, to escape death by the edge of the sword. These people did those things. Their weakness was turned to strength. We all have weakness. So often the strongest among us really are the weakest among us. We're just hiding that weakness underneath this facade of strength. But can you imagine the weakness that you feel for the problems and the things in your life being actually turned to strength? These people became strong in battle, the Bible says. They put entire armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back from the dead. But others, the text says, were tortured. So not everybody who is great in God's eyes, who has done amazing things in God's eyes, not everyone is closing the mouth of lions and chasing armies down. Not everyone who's listed or should be listed in a hall of faith is conquering their life without any suffering or pain. You see, for many people, they're tortured, but yet even when they suffer, they refuse to turn from God in order to be set free. They place their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Verse 36 says that some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world. I love that line. They were too good for this world. If you have ever felt like an outsider in this world, like no matter how good you are or no matter what great things you've done, it isn't seen, it isn't applauded, that only those people who connive and cheat and thieve and steal, only those people who act without ethics and morals get ahead in this world, then this describes you. You are too good for this world. Shouldn't that be the description of every Christian, every follower of Jesus? That they are too good for this world? The sad thing is that the opposite so often is true, right? That we look at other Christians and other followers of Christ and we see these people and we say, wow, you're worse. You're worse than this world. You've set the bar so low that even those who follow God and even those who follow Jesus are doing better at living a holy life than you are. I hope that for all of us, the epitaph that can be written is, you know what? She was too good for this world. He was too good for this world. These people that are being described here in this chapter, wandering over deserts and mountains, they hid in caves and holes in the ground. Verse 39 says all of these people earned a good reputation. Why? Because of their faith, not because of their money, not because of their social status, not because of the network that they were in, not because of how they voted or what political party they were a part of or who they smoozed. No, all of these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. They had a good reputation and they had faith, but none of them received all that God had promised. What does that mean? Well, we'll get there in just a moment because I want to dive a little bit more deeply into this, but God had something better in mind. God had something better in mind for them, and God had something better in mind for us so that they would not reach perfection without us. So let's talk through this passage just a little bit. Because I think that there are some things here that get missed because we so oftentimes focus on the stories of all of these other great people of faith rather than reflecting on this addition to the end of the passage. And I think that this addition to the end of those names where it talks about so many other people and then kind of turns the focus on us really changes the whole point of the passage. And so oftentimes we miss that. So let's look at it and see. First thing I would say is we see all of these amazing names listed, these people of faith. But when you look down through those lists of names, and the writer has pointed this out multiple times, but we missed it, they didn't receive the fulfillment of their promises, most of them, during their lifetime, or certainly didn't receive the full fulfillment of it. Take for Abraham. Abraham, at the end of his life, he had been promised land, he had been promised a great nation and a great people, but at the end of his life, the only land that Abraham owned was his wife's grave. Think about that. He was promised a family, a community, as many as the stars in the sky. He was promised this promised land, but at the end of his life, the only land that he owned was the plot in the cemetery in which Sarah lay. And yet he believed that God was using him, was going to use him to build a new community to transform the world. The fulfillment of the promises that God has made to you may not come during your lifetime. You got to wrestle with that. Will you still have faith? Will you still have faith in things unseen? Will you still have faith in things that may not come to pass in the next 24 hours or the next week? So oftentimes I feel like we expect God to act on our behalf, to fulfill his promises, to come through and to fight for us immediately. And when that doesn't happen, we lose faith. And Abraham in this list of people is a reminder that God still works, but God works on his own timetable. The other thing that I think is important to recognize here, and this is point 2 out of 4, is that the real heroes here, I think, in this passage are the unnamed and the unsung heroes. And most of our reading today in verses 32 to 40 has written about the stories of people whose names are lost to time and lost to history. In fact, I think they're intentionally unnamed and they're unsung, some of whom saw the miraculous, but all of whom refused to compromise, whatever the cost. These people are here and are giants in the faith because of the fact, not that they hadn't received all of their promise that God had given to them, but they're here because they refused to compromise. They refused to give up. They refused to turn their back on God, no matter how the current predicament looks. That's what makes a spiritual giant. That's what makes you someone who is great, is the stubborn refusal to give up on what God has promised for you and for us, no matter how the situation may look in the moment and whatever cost may come to you. The reason why so many people walk away from God and lose their faith is because so many of us are in it for what we're going to get in return. And whenever the cost gets too high, we bail. We bail before the promise comes through. Don't let that be you. And for many of us, being unsung and unnamed is part of the problem. We want the glory. We want people to tell stories about how we tamed the lion and shut its mouth, how we led armies to do incredible things. But would you still be willing to do those things if you weren't going to receive the credit? And why do you want the credit anyway? Why isn't the credit going to God? 3. This is not here in Hebrews 11 a record of great people who deserve a medal, but this is a record of ordinary people who are made extraordinary by grace. And I think that this is such a powerful, powerful thing for you and I. Most of us won't ever be an Abraham or an Abel. We won't be a Noah. We won't be a King David or a Solomon. We're not going to be a Sarah or a Ruth, an Esther or a Deborah. We're not going to be probably any of those people. We're just ordinary people. But this passage is a reminder to us that it is precisely the ordinary people whom God prefers to use because he can make them extraordinary by grace. If you're an ordinary person and you feel like the world and the church are passing you by, but you are strongly committed to God, you're following him, you're serving him, you're holding on no matter whatever the cost, I can promise you that God will use you, and likely God is using you in ways that you don't even see. Powerfully, maybe even more powerfully than Noah and Abram and Sarah. You see, I think that that's the point of this passage, is it lists these people and the great things that they have done. But you know what? It moves on and says, but you know what? These people did these things, and yeah, that was amazing. They held on to their promises. But what about all of these other ordinary people who aren't named and did even more extraordinary things than that? What about these people? And what about you? I think it says, what about you? And finally, I think it has to be said here, and this is the part that maybe we struggle with. Faithfulness sometimes leads to martyrdom. Literally, even around the world today, there are still martyrs. In fact, statistically, there has been no greater time in the church where more people have been martyred than today. We always think, well, that's in our past, but no, it's in our present. We just, here in the U.S., we're insulated, isolated intentionally from the rest of the world. What the rest of the church around the world deals with is we're blind to it. So martyrdom does still happen literally, and faithfulness sometimes, many times leads to that for many modern Christians. But I think too that can be seen as being figurative or metaphorical as well. Oftentimes when you are faithful, you're going to be martyred for it. You're going to be martyred by your friend group. You're going to be martyred by your family. You're going to be sometimes martyred by your church, by your religious and spiritual circles. Following Jesus is not for the faint of heart. And faithfulness oftentimes leads to suffering. And that's okay. And if that's where you are, let me know. Let me pray with you. Let me walk alongside you through that. Make sure that you have someone who's walking alongside of you. I'd say don't go it alone, but you're not alone. Jesus is there with you, and he certainly understands what it means to be martyred for your faith. So if you're struggling, if you're suffering right now, more than likely you're on the right path. Now, tomorrow we get to continue reading because, well, essentially when these were written, there was not any chapters and verses. So we're going to keep reading as the writer intended us to do into chapter 12. But as we reflect on this, I want you and I to walk away from this not impressed by what these other people were able to do and accomplish because of their faith. I hope that you walk away reflecting on what you have done and are able to do and will be able to accomplish because of your faith, if you're willing to follow Jesus wherever he leads you, whatever the cost, and endure, knowing that the promises will be fulfilled that he's given you, just maybe not in the way you would prefer or on your timetable. And with the understanding that sometimes suffering and martyrdom comes. But as for me, I would much rather follow God through hell than walk alone through this world, knowing that at the end is following someone else or something else other than Jesus. May that be said of you. May that be said of me. May that be said of all of us. Until tomorrow, happy reading.